I am Brandon, 34 years old, a software engineer who always put family first. Christmas dinner was supposed to be special this year. I arrived with premium gifts and an expensive bottle of wine, expecting warm hugs and holiday cheer. Instead, I left with pumpkin pie dripping down my face and red wine staining my new sweater. What started as a festive family gathering turned into the most humiliating night of my life, followed by a shocking revelation from the most unexpected source. Before I share what my 5-year-old niece revealed that left my entire family speechless, drop a comment, letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button and prepare yourself for a story about betrayal, truth, redemption. Growing up in suburban Chicago, our family was firmly middle class. My dad worked as an account manager at an insurance company while Mom taught second grade at the local elementary school. We never had luxury vacations or the newest gadgets, but we got by comfortably enough. At least that is what I thought until I realized how differently my sister Melissa and I were treated. Melissa came along when I was 8 years old. From the moment she arrived, it was clear she held a special place in our family dynamic. Where I had to earn my allowance by mowing lawns and taking out trash, Melissa received hers simply for existing. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, I saved up for 6 months. When Melissa wanted a phone at age 11, my parents bought her the latest iPhone without hesitation. Do not get me wrong, I loved my little sister. 8 years apart meant I was more like a third parent than a sibling. I drove her to dance recitals, helped with homework, and defended her from bullies. But even as a teenager, I could not ignore the obvious favoritism. My straight has earned a nod of approval, while her C's and D's were celebrated because at least she tried her best. The disparity continued into our college years. I worked incredibly hard to earn a scholarship to MIT. Even with that financial help, I still had to juggle 3 part-time jobs to cover living expenses. I worked as a teaching assistant during weekdays, delivered pizzas on Friday and Saturday nights, and spent Sundays coding freelance projects. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Meanwhile, my parents fully funded Melissa at a private liberal arts college, despite her mediocre grades. When she decided to switch majors 4 times, extending her education to 6 years, they simply wrote another check. Despite this uneven treatment, I persevered. After graduation, I secured a position at a tech startup that eventually grew into one of the biggest names in the industry. By age 34, I had worked my way up to senior software engineer with a salary that would have impressed my younger self. I lived well, but modestly, investing heavily and saving for the family I hoped to have someday. My 1-bedroom apartment was comfortable, but not flashy. My 5-year-old Toyota got me where I needed to go. My biggest splurges were contributions to my retirement accounts and a growing down payment fund for a future home. Melissa took a different path. After finally graduating with a communications degree, she worked briefly at a PR firm before meeting and marrying Theodore, a banker from a wealthy family. Their wedding was an extravagant affair that cost my parents nearly $50,000. I later learned they delayed their retirement by 2 years to pay for it. Theodore and Melissa moved into a 5,000-square-foot house in an exclusive neighborhood. She drove a Mercedes SUV and carried handbags that cost more than my monthly rent. Their daughter Emma was born 3 years ago, instantly becoming the apple of my parents' eyes. Over the past 2 years, my contact with the family had become less frequent. I had moved across the country for my job, and the time difference made regular calls challenging. Mom would occasionally send updates about Melissa and Emma with brief questions about my life tacked on as an afterthought. Dad rarely called at all. When he did, conversations revolved around whether I had met someone yet, as if my career accomplishments meant nothing without a wedding ring. Despite the distance, both geographical and emotional, I made efforts to stay connected. Birthday gifts were always sent on time. Video calls were scheduled when possible. Christmas and Thanksgiving typically brought us together physically, though each gathering seemed to highlight our growing differences rather than our shared history. This Christmas, I was especially excited to reconnect. My company had just completed a major project, allowing me to take a full 2 weeks off. I had carefully selected gifts for everyone. A vintage watch for Dad, matching one. His father had owned a spa package for Mom at the resort she had mentioned. Wanting to visit, a limited edition designer scarf for Melissa that I had stood in. lined for 3 hours, to purchase golf clubs for Theodore that his colleagues at the bank would envy, and an elaborate dollhouse for Emma that I had shipped directly to my parents' house due to its size. Looking back, I realize I was trying to buy the approval and affection that never seemed freely given. Each gift represented not just my financial ability to provide them, but hours spent researching preferences and tracking down the perfect items. In my mind, these physical tokens would somehow bridge the emotional gap that had been widening for years. The drive to my parents' suburban home that Christmas morning was filled with anticipation and anxiety. 2 years had passed since my last visit. Phone calls and video chats had maintained a thin connection. But I wondered how much had changed. Would Emma even remember me? Would Melissa and I find common ground as adults? Would my parents finally see me as the successful man I had become, rather than the perpetual disappointment I sometimes felt they viewed me as? Little did I know that these hopeful questions would soon be replaced by far more painful ones, and that the carefully wrapped packages in my trunk represented the last attempt at normal family relations we would have for a very long time. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered it from childhood Christmases. Inflatable snowmen stood guard on front lawns. Colorful lights outlined rooftops and windows. Wreaths adorned nearly every door. The familiarity brought a wave of nostalgia as I pulled into my parents' driveway. Mom answered the door before I could knock, her arms outstretched for a hug that felt slightly mechanical. Her perfume was the same she had worn for 20 years, but something in her expression seemed guarded. "Brandon, you made it. Come in before you freeze," she said, ushering me inside. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, the traditional scents of our family Christmas. Dad appeared from the living room, offering a firm handshake instead of the hug I had expected. "Good to see you, son. Trip okay?" His pleasantries felt rehearsed, lacking the warmth I had hoped for after such a long absence. Before I could answer, a small voice shouted from the staircase. Uncle Brandon Emma, now 5 years old, came bounding down the steps in a red velvet dress with white tights. Her hair was arranged in perfect curls, and her smile seemed the only genuine one in the house. She crashed into my legs with unrestrained affection. "Wow, look how big you are," I said, kneeling down to her level. "I bet you do not even remember me from last time." "I do too. You sent me the butterfly kite for my birthday." "Daddy says you live where the computers come from," she replied, her innocence instantly melting the tension I felt. Melissa appeared next, looking stunning in an outfit that probably cost more than my entire suitcase of clothes. "Brandon finally decided to grace us with your presence." Her tone wavered between teasing and something sharper. She offered a quick cheek kiss that felt like a formality. Her husband Theodore followed, checking his expensive watch, as if my arrival had delayed something important. "Brandon, good to see you." His handshake was unnecessarily firm, his smile not reaching his eyes. I distributed hugs and holiday wishes while dragging in my suitcase and the bag of carefully wrapped gifts. As I placed them under the tree, I noticed several hushed conversations stop abruptly. Mom and Melissa exchanged glances when they thought I was not looking. Dad and Theodore seemed to be having some sort of silent communication across the room. "So still single? No special someone to bring home yet?" Mom asked within the first 5 minutes, her tone suggesting I was somehow failing at life despite my career success. "Work keeps me busy," I answered, the standard response I had developed over years of similar questioning. "At your age, I already had you, and was coaching your Little League team," Dad added, as if my life followed a fixed timeline I was falling behind on. "Different times, Dad," I replied, trying to keep things light. "Tech industry is not big on work-life balance." "That fancy job of yours must pay well enough to settle down," Theodore interjected. "What are you waiting for?" The conversation continued in this uncomfortable vein through the afternoon. Each time I tried to share news about my promotion or the exciting project I had just completed, the topic would somehow shift back to my lack of a family or to Melissa's latest achievements. I offered to help Mom in the kitchen, but she shooed me away with unusual insistence. "No, you are the guest. Go catch up with your father." When I entered the living room, Dad and Theodore abruptly ended what appeared to be an intense conversation. Melissa seemed particularly on edge, checking her phone constantly and barely making eye contact when we spoke. When I asked about her boutique business she had mentioned starting last year, she gave vague answers before changing the subject. It is fine. Actually, I am focusing more on Emma now. Speaking of which, I should check on her. She hurried away before I could ask any follow-up questions. Emma provided the only normal interactions of the day. She showed me her collection of stuffed unicorns, told me about kindergarten, and asked innocent questions about why I did not visit more often. During one of these conversations, she mentioned something peculiar. Mommy and Daddy got a big new house near the beach, but they said it is a secret from Uncle Brandon. Is that because you do not like the beach? Before I could process this confusing statement, Melissa appeared, her face flushing. Emma, honey, what did we say about telling stories? There is no beach house. She has such an imagination, she added with a forced laugh, quickly leading Emma away. Later, I overheard fragments of conversation from the hallway outside the guest bathroom. He has no idea about the financial situation, my father was saying in hushed tones. Are you sure this is the only way? My mother sounded worried. Theodore says the paperwork is ready. We just need to present it right, Melissa responded. They fell silent when I emerged, all three wearing unconvincing smiles. The red flag that had been gently waving in my mind all day now flapped with alarming intensity. Dinner preparations continued with an undercurrent of tension. The table was set with the good china and crystal glasses that only appeared on special occasions. Traditional dishes filled the dining room with enticing aromas: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, and my favorite sweet potato pie with marshmallow topping. As we took our seats, Dad stood for his annual Christmas toast. His words about family and togetherness rang hollow when he added a strange addendum. And may we remember that family obligations are sacred, that we sacrifice for those we love without question or hesitation. Everyone raised their glasses with an intensity that felt rehearsed, their eyes darting to gauge my reaction. I sipped my wine slowly, the unease in my stomach growing stronger with each passing minute. Throughout dinner, I caught my mother wiping away tears that seemed to appear whenever I mentioned my future plans. Dad kept steering the conversation toward financial topics. My salary, investments, savings. Theodore asked pointed questions about my company stock options and bonus structure. Do you have access to liquid cash if needed? He asked between bites of turkey, the question so inappropriate, I nearly choked. I manage my finances just fine, I responded coolly, increasingly certain something was very wrong. Family sometimes needs to pull together in times of crisis, Dad added cryptically. By the time dessert was served, the atmosphere was so thick with unspoken tension, I could barely breathe. Emma, oblivious to adult concerns, chattered happily about Santa and presents her innocence, a stark contrast to whatever drama was unfolding around us. I caught Melissa whispering to our mother near the kitchen. Is everything ready for after dinner? Mom nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. The envelope is with the other gifts. I pretended not to hear, but my appetite had disappeared completely. Whatever was coming, I knew instinctively it would forever change our family dynamic. I just had no idea how right that instinct would prove to be. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for the traditional gift exchange. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, adorned with ornaments collected over decades, handmade school projects, commemorative baubles from family vacations, and the crystal star topper that had graced our tree for as long as I could remember. Family photos lined the mantel, documenting our growth from toddlers to adults, frozen smiles, preserving moments that now felt like they belonged to different people entirely. I distributed my carefully selected gifts, watching with growing disappointment, as each was received with lukewarm appreciation. Dad barely glanced at the vintage watch that had taken me months to track down, a replica of his father's prized possession lost years ago in a move. Nice, he said flatly, returning it to its box without trying it on. Mom thanked me for the spa package, but immediately expressed concern about who would watch Emma if she were gone for a weekend. Melissa fingered the designer scarf with mild interest before setting it aside without even removing all the wrapping paper. Theodore opened the golf clubs, made a comment about already having a similar set, and propped them in the corner. Only Emma showed genuine excitement, squealing with delight at the Victorian dollhouse I had spent hours researching. "It is just like the one in my fairy tale book," she exclaimed, immediately beginning to arrange the tiny furniture. The adults exchanged uncomfortable glances as Emma played as if her authentic joy disrupted some predetermined script. Then my parents began distributing their gifts, starting with elaborate presents for Melissa, Theodore, and Emma. Melissa received diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. Theodore unwrapped an expensive-looking leather briefcase. Emma collected several large toys and clothes, her pile growing impressively. Finally, Mom handed me a small envelope with Brandon, written on the front in her precise teacher handwriting. "This is a special gift," Dad said, his voice taking on an unusual formality. "One that demonstrates our trust in you." The room fell silent as I opened the envelope, expecting perhaps a gift card or concert tickets. Instead, I found a typed letter detailing an outstanding debt of $300,000 under Melissa's name, with a payment schedule and my name listed as the responsible party. Attached were bank transfer details. I looked up in confusion, certain this was some bizarre joke. "What is this?" Dad cleared his throat. "Melissa's business venture encountered some difficulties. The boutique investment went wrong. There were loans taken out that now need to be repaid. We are facing potential bankruptcy," Mom added, tears welling in her eyes. "Your sister and her family could lose everything." I stared at them in disbelief. "And you expect me to pay off her debt? $300,000. "You are family," Dad said firmly. "You have the means." "You do not have a wife or kids," Mom added, as if this somehow made my savings less important. "Your sister has responsibilities, a child to think about." Melissa still would not meet my eyes, staring intently at her perfectly manicured nails. Theodore sat with his arm around her, his posture defensive. "This does not make sense," I said, trying to process the information. "Theodore works at an investment bank. You live in a mansion. You drive luxury cars. Why would you need my money?" "The business was in Melissa's name," Theodore explained with practiced patience, as if speaking to a child. "Her credit is on the line. Our assets are complicated." "What exactly was this business?" I asked, noticing the vague descriptions that provided no actual details. "A high-end boutique," Melissa finally spoke. "Designer consignment. The location fell through after renovations, and the inventory investment was lost." Something did not add up. My sister, who had never shown interest in retail or fashion beyond shopping for herself, suddenly launching a business significant enough to accumulate $300,000 in debt. Theodore, with his family wealth and six-figure banking job, unable to cover it. "I would need to see the business plan, loan documents, proof of loss," I said, my analytical mind kicking in. "This is a substantial amount of money." "We need an answer tonight," Dad pressed. "The creditors are not waiting." "This is crazy," I replied, feeling ambushed. "You spring this on me during Christmas dinner and expect me to empty my savings without any due diligence. That money is for my future, my home, potentially my own children someday. So your theoretical future family is more important than your sister's actual family right now?" Mom asked, her voice rising. "That is not what I said," I countered. "I am asking for reasonable information before committing to a massive financial obligation. Who exactly is this debt owed to? Why was I not consulted before being volunteered as a bailout plan?" "Because we knew you would react like this," Dad snapped. "Always the calculator, always the questions. Family helps family, period." "I have always helped," I responded, feeling anger rise. "I sent money when you needed a new roof. I paid for Melissa's car repairs last year. But $300,000 without explanation, that is not helping. That is being taken advantage of." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emma had stopped playing with her dollhouse, sensing the tension, though too young to understand its source. "We are not asking," Theodore said coldly. "We are telling you what needs to happen." "Excuse me." I stood up, the letter crumpled in my hand. "You are telling me it is my money. Money you only have because this family sacrificed for your education," Dad retorted. I could not believe what I was hearing. I worked 3 jobs through college. I had scholarships. You paid a fraction of what you spent on Melissa's 6 years of college hopping. So now you are keeping score. Melissa finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of anger and something else, something that looked suspiciously like guilt. I want to see proof, I insisted. Bank statements, loan documents, business registration. If this is legitimate, I deserve to know exactly what I am paying for. By the time we gather all that, it could be too late, Dad said dismissively. Too late for what businesses fail every day without siblings being forced to cover the losses. There are legal protections, bankruptcy procedures if things are truly as dire as you claim. So you would let your sister go through bankruptcy? Mom gasped, as if I had suggested something truly horrific. If necessary, yes, I answered honestly, especially without understanding what actually happened to such a large sum of money. After everything we have done for you, Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. What exactly have you done for me lately? I shot back years of unequal treatment finally bubbling to the surface. For the past decade, I have been the family ATM while getting nothing but criticism about my personal life and career choices. How dare you, Mom whispered. No, how dare all of you, I replied, standing my ground. I need time to think about this, to consult with my financial advisor, to see actual documentation. I will not be making any decisions tonight. There is no time, Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the coffee table hard enough to make the ornaments on the lower branches of the Christmas tree shudder. This is happening now. Your sister needs you now. I looked around at their faces, suddenly seeing the situation with painful clarity. This was not a recent emergency. This had been planned, probably for months. The awkward conversations, the probing questions about my finances, the strange comments about family obligation. They had orchestrated this ambush using Christmas as the emotional leverage. The answer is no, I said firmly. Not without proper information and time to consider. That is final. For 3 heartbeats, the room was completely silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, a sound that had formed the backdrop of my childhood. In that brief moment of quiet, I saw a kaleidoscope of emotions cross my father's face. Shock, disbelief, anger, and finally rage. His face turned a dangerous shade of crimson, the vein in his forehead pulsing visibly. Without warning, he lunged toward the dessert table, grabbed the untouched pumpkin pie, and hurled it directly at my face. The cold, sticky filling hit me with surprising force. Cinnamon nutmeg and pureed pumpkin filled my nostrils and clouded my vision. Chunks of crust clung to my eyebrows and slid down my cheeks. The plate clattered to the hardwood floor, breaking into jagged pieces. Everyone froze. Emma whimpered from her corner by the dollhouse. Theodore stood with his mouth slightly open, apparently shocked that the situation had escalated to physical aggression. Mom pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide. Then Melissa, my sister, who I had protected from bullies and helped with homework, who I had driven to dance recitals and consoled through teenage breakups, grabbed her nearly full glass of red wine and threw its contents directly into my face. The wine mixed with the pie, creating a sticky, sweet, alcohol-scented mess that immediately began soaking into my sweater, a $300 cashmere blend that had been a gift to myself for my recent promotion. The dark liquid seeped through to my skin, cold and accusatory. You selfish, heartless jerk. Melissa hissed, her perfect makeup, unable to mask the ugly hatred distorting her features. I stood immobile, dripping with food and drink, trying to process how a family Christmas had devolved into this scene. Before I could speak or even wipe my face, Mom broke the shocked silence with a scream that seemed to come from deep within her. Get out of my house, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward the door. Get out. Emma began crying in earnest, now confused and frightened by the adult's behavior. Mommy, why is everyone being mean to Uncle Brandon? Quiet, Emma, Theodore snapped, moving to stand in front of the doorway, as if I might refuse to leave. I grabbed a napkin from the coffee table and tried to clear enough pie from my eyes to see properly. This is how you handle rejection. By assaulting me. And screaming. You are no son of mine, Dad growled, his hands still clenched into fists. No son would abandon his family in their time of need. Family, I laughed bitterly. Is this what you call family? ambushing me with financial demands and attacking me when I ask for basic information. "We have given you everything," Mom sobbed, dramatically. "Everything. And this is how you repay us." I looked at each of them, really looked, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. Whatever bonds had once connected us had been severed not by my refusal tonight, but by years of unbalanced expectations and conditional love. "I will get my coat," I said quietly, dignity being the only thing I had left to preserve. "Take your worthless gifts too," Melissa spat. "We do not need your charity." I ignored her, moving toward the hallway closet. Theodore stepped aside at the last moment, his stance still aggressive. As I retrieved my coat, I could hear my parents and sister talking about me as if I were already gone. "Always been selfish," Dad muttered. "We will figure something out," Theodore reassured them, though his tone suggested no actual solutions. I made one final attempt at reason, turning back toward the living room. "If there is a legitimate financial crisis, I am willing to discuss options once I have all the information. What I will not do is blindly transfer my life savings based on vague claims and emotional manipulation." "You are dead to us," Mom replied coldly, tears still streaming down her face. "Dead." With those words hanging in the air, I walked out the front door into the bitter December night. The cold air made the wine and pie residue on my face sting sharply. I trudged to my car, aware of neighbors' Christmas lights casting colorful shadows on the slush-covered driveway, creating a surreal contrast to the ugly scene I had just left. Inside my car, I sat motionless, unable to process fully what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. With sticky fingers, I pulled it out to find a Venmo request from Melissa for exactly $300,000 with the note, "Family obligation." The audacity was so extreme it bordered on comical. I declined the request and turned off my phone, suddenly exhausted beyond words. My face and clothes were still covered in food, but I could not summon the energy to clean up. The gifts I had so carefully selected remained inside, abandoned like my place in the family. Through the windshield, I could see silhouettes moving in the brightly lit house, animated conversations continuing without me. 20 years of adulthood had taught me to question data that did not add up to verify claims before accepting them as truth. Tonight, applying those same principles to my family had cost me my place among them. I placed my key in the ignition but did not turn it. Despite everything, driving away felt like admitting final defeat, like severing the last thread connecting me to the people who had raised me, however imperfectly. So I sat covered in pie and wine, wondering if blood ties were strong enough to survive tonight's revelations about just how conditional family love could be. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. The heat was running, but I barely noticed my mind replaying the events of the night on a continuous loop. The demanding letter, the angry accusations, the pie hitting my face, my mother's final words, "You are dead to us." A soft tapping on my window startled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Emma standing outside, her small body wrapped in a coat, hastily thrown over her Christmas dress. No hat or gloves despite the freezing temperature. Her face was streaked with tears, her breath creating small clouds in the cold night air. Immediately concerned, I rolled down the window. "Emma, honey, what are you doing out here? It is freezing. Are you leaving Uncle Brandon?" Her voice trembled, either from cold or emotion. "You should not be out here alone." "Does your mom know where you are?" I asked, already opening my door. She shook her head, more tears spilling down her cheeks. "They are all yelling inside. Nobody saw me leave. I could not leave a 5-year-old outside in the cold, regardless of what had just transpired with the adults. Get in the car where it is warm, okay? I will take you back inside in a minute." She climbed into the passenger seat, her small body dwarfed by the space. Despite my food-covered appearance, she scooted closer to me, seeking comfort. "I am sorry they threw food at you," she said, her innocence cutting through my anger. "Mommy says we are not supposed to throw food. Ever." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. "Your mommy is right about that." "Are you not family anymore?" Grandma said. "You are not family now." The simple question hit harder than the pie had. How does one explain adult dysfunction to a child? Family is complicated sometimes, Emma. Adults disagree, but that does not change that I am your uncle. I will always be your uncle. She seemed to consider this, her small brow furrowing in concentration. Then she dropped a bombshell with the straightforward clarity only children possess. Is it because of the beach house Mommy and Daddy bought a new house near the water? It has a pool and a boat. I froze my hand halfway to wiping more pie from my collar. What beach house, Emma? The surprise one. Mommy said, I cannot tell you because it is a secret, but since you are leaving forever, maybe it is okay now. Her logic, while flawed, opened a door to truth. I immediately needed to walk through. When did they buy this house? I asked, keeping my voice gentle, to avoid frightening her. After my birthday. We went to see it in the airplane. She pantomimed, flying with her hand. It is in Flora, where the oranges grow. Florida primero, sugested. She nodded enthusiastically. Florida Daddy bought a boat too, a big one that goes super fast, and Mommy got sparkly rings for her fingers and ears. Each word felt like another piece clicking into a puzzle I had not realized I was solving. Emma, did your mom have a store? A boutique where she sold clothes. Emma looked confused. Mommy does not work at a store. She goes to lunch with ladies and gets her nails painted. She said working is for people who do not have a rich husband. She repeated this clearly adult phrase with perfect mimicry. I see, and I did see with increasing clarity. Do you have your iPad with you? The one with the purple case? She nodded and pulled it from her coat pocket. I brought it to show you my new room at the beach house. Mommy took pictures. With slightly trembling hands, I helped her unlock the device and navigate to the photos. There they were, dozens of images documenting what appeared to be a luxury waterfront property. Photos showed Melissa and Theodore posing in front of a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion. Another series captured Theodore standing proudly beside a sleek speedboat. Other images displayed Melissa modeling what looked like new jewelry, her wrist and neck adorned with diamonds. The timestamps on the photos told their own story. All taken within the past 3 months, the period during which they were supposedly facing financial ruin from a failed business venture. Emma, did you ever hear your parents talking about asking me for money? She nodded again, guileless. Daddy said Uncle Brandon has lots of money in the computer job but no family to spend it on. He said it would be easy to trick you because you always want Mommy and Grandpa to be happy with you. The words cut deep precisely because they contained a kernel of truth. I had always sought approval from my family, working extra hard for the recognition that came so easily to Melissa. Are you crying, Uncle Brandon? Emma asked, reaching out to touch my cheek where genuine tears now mixed with the sticky residue of pumpkin pie. Just a little, I admitted. Sometimes adults cry when they learn important things. Is it a sad, important thing? Yes, I answered honestly. But it is good to know the truth, even when it hurts. Emma seemed to accept this wisdom. She continued swiping through photos, unaware of how each image further confirmed my suspicions. There were no failed boutiques, no financial crisis, no impending bankruptcy. There was only a systematic attempt to defraud me of my savings to fund their already luxurious lifestyle. Emma, I said carefully, would it be okay if I recorded our conversation, just so I remember all the important things you are telling me? She nodded, distracted by a photo of herself wearing a princess swimsuit by an infinity pool. I quietly activated my phone's recording function, then gently asked more questions about the beach house, when they had purchased it, and what else her parents had bought recently. With each innocent answer, Emma unknowingly provided evidence of what appeared to be not just a family betrayal, but potentially fraud. Mentions of tricking Uncle Brandon and not telling the bank were particularly concerning. After gathering enough information, I made a decision. Emma, I think we should go back inside now. Your parents will be worried about you. Will you come too? She asked, hopefully. I nodded, a new resolve hardening within me. Yes. I think there are some things we need to discuss. As a family. I helped her out of the car and took her small hand in mine. The walk back to the front door felt like crossing a threshold into a new reality. One where the family I thought I had existed only in memory The truth had been revealed not by careful investigation or adult confrontation, but by the innocent honesty of a child who did not yet understand the concept of deception. I rang the doorbell, Emma's hand still in mine, and waited to face the family that had just thrown me out but was about to face their own reckoning. The door swung open to reveal my mother, her face transitioning from annoyed to shocked when she saw Emma beside me. Behind her, I could hear multiple voices calling Emma's name in panic. "She is here," Mom shouted over her shoulder before fixing me with an accusatory glare. "What are you doing with her? We have been looking everywhere." Before I could answer, Melissa pushed past our mother, her face blotchy from either crying or anger. "Emma, come here right now." She grabbed Emma's arm, perhaps more roughly than she intended, pulling her away from me. "Emma was outside in the freezing cold," I said calmly. "She came to my car upset about what happened." Theodore appeared next, his earlier composure completely abandoned. "You took our daughter. I should call the police." "She came to me," I corrected, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "And I think the police are the last people you want involved right now." My father emerged from the kitchen, his face still flushed with anger. "I thought I made it clear. You are not welcome here anymore." I closed the front door behind me. "Emma, could you show everyone the pictures on your iPad? The ones of the new beach house in Florida." The room went deadly silent. Melissa's face drained of color so quickly I momentarily worried she might faint. Theodore froze mid-gesture, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. My parents exchanged a panicked glance that confirmed their complicity. "What pictures?" Mom attempted weakly. Emma, oblivious to the bombshell. She was dropping happily, unlocked her iPad. "I can show you our new vacation house. It has a waterfall in the swimming pool. And a room just for movies." She turned the screen toward the adults, proudly displaying photos of the luxurious property that directly contradicted the story of financial ruin I had been fed less than an hour ago. "Emma, that is enough." Theodore snapped, trying to take the iPad from her hands. "No," I said firmly. "Let her continue. In fact, I think we all need to see these photos. Emma, tell everyone about the boat your daddy bought. It is super fast and shiny." Emma swiped to photos of Theodore standing proudly next to what appeared to be a high-end speedboat. "Daddy says it cost more than our first house." Melissa made another attempt to stop the revelation. "Emma, sweetie, remember what we said about private family things?" "But Uncle Brandon is family," Emma replied with the child's perfect logic. "Even if Grandma said he is not anymore." I took out my phone and held it up. I recorded my conversation with Emma in the car. She mentioned quite a few interesting things about tricking Uncle Brandon and not telling the bank certain information. I wonder what the bank Theodore works for would think about that. Theodore took a threatening step toward me. "Give me that phone." "I would not do that if I were you," I warned. "Assault charges would just add to your problems." "You cannot prove anything," he blustered, though his confidence was clearly shaken. "The photos are time-stamped," I pointed out. "They show luxury purchases made during the exact period you claim to be facing financial ruin from a failed business." Emma mentioned there never was a boutique. She also repeated several damning statements she overheard about your plans to trick me. I turned to my parents. "And you two? Were you getting a cut of my money? Or were you just so desperate to maintain Melissa's lifestyle that you were willing to sacrifice your relationship with your son?" Mom began crying, but these tears seemed genuine, unlike the performative ones earlier. "We did not know everything. They said they had investment problems, that they might lose the house. We were just trying to help them." "By stealing from me?" I asked incredulously. "We never would have asked if we thought they were lying," Dad said, though his eyes could not meet mine. "Really? Because Emma says this has been planned for months. That is a long time to remain ignorant." Melissa finally broke down. "Fine. Yes, we bought a vacation property. Yes, we spent money on some luxury items. But we do have debts too. From overspending, not a failed business," I clarified. "There never was a boutique, was there?" Her silence was confirmation enough. "You threw food at me, called me selfish, and disowned me because I would not give you money for your beach house and boat. The full reality of their betrayal hit me anew. You make so much money, Melissa said weakly. You do not even have a family to support. That was my future security you tried to steal. My retirement. My future children's college fund. All so you could have a second home. Theodore attempted to regain control of the situation. This is all a misunderstanding. Is it I held up my phone? Should I play the recording where Emma quotes you, saying it would be easy to trick me because I always want my family's approval, or the part where she mentions you instructing her to keep the beach house a secret from me specifically? You recorded our child without permission, Theodore blustered. That is illegal. Actually, in this state, single-party consent is perfectly legal for recordings. But feel free to challenge that in court, where you can also explain the attempted fraud. Emma, confused by the adult conversation, tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, why is everyone mad? Did I do something bad? The innocent question seemed to cut through Melissa's defenses. She knelt down to Emma's level. No, honey. You did not do anything wrong. The grown-ups did something wrong, and now we have to face the consequences. It was the first honest statement I had heard from my sister all day. I looked at each family member in turn. Here is what happens now. I am leaving, and this time it is my choice. I will not press charges or report Theodore to his bank on several conditions. What conditions? Dad asked cautiously. First, a complete acknowledgement of what you tried to do today. No more lies or evasions. Second, I want no contact from any of you except for Emma for at least 6 months. I need time to process this betrayal. Third, when or if we resume contact, it will be with complete transparency about finances. No more requests for money ever. And if we refuse, Theodore challenged, though, with notably less confidence. I held up my phone again. Then this recording goes to your employer, along with documentation of today's attempt to defraud me of $300,000. I imagine investment banks take a dim view of personal financial fraud by their employees. The fight seemed to drain out of him. My parents looked crushed, finally understanding the magnitude of what had transpired. Melissa held Emma close, whispering what appeared to be genuine apologies in her ear. I trusted you, I said, looking at my family. All of you. That trust is now broken. Maybe someday we can rebuild something, but it will never be what it was. Brandon, Dad, began, his voice rough with emotion. We were wrong. Terribly wrong. Yes, you were. I agreed, not yet ready to offer forgiveness. And the worst part is that none of you would have admitted it if Emma had not accidentally revealed the truth. I knelt down to Emma's level, making sure to keep my voice gentle. Emma, thank you for being honest. That is very important. Even when grown-ups forget sometimes. Can I give you a hug goodbye? She nodded and wrapped her small arms around my neck. Are you still my uncle? Always, I promised. No matter what happens with the other grown-ups, I will always be your uncle. I stood and walked to the door, turning one last time to address my family. Merry Christmas. I hope the beach house was worth it. With those words, I walked out, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions and the moral bankruptcy that had been exposed, not by sophisticated investigation, but by the simple honesty of a child. The drive back to my hotel that night was a blur. I stopped at a gas station bathroom to clean the worst of the pie and wine from my face and clothes, but the stains, like the emotional wounds, would not easily wash away. The holiday season, normally a time of warmth and connection, stretched before me like an empty highway. For the first week, I fluctuated between anger, grief, and disbelief. I extended my hotel stay, unable to face the long drive home or a crowded airport in my emotional state. I ordered room service for Christmas dinner, a sad plate of turkey and stuffing that I barely touched. New Year came and went without celebration. I spoke to no one except the hotel staff and my boss, who graciously extended my time off when I explained I was dealing with a family emergency. By mid-January, I recognized the need for professional help processing what had happened. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and our weekly sessions became anchors in the stormy sea of my emotions. Doctor. Marshall helped me understand that my family's betrayal was not a reflection of my worth, but of their own moral failings. You did nothing wrong by establishing boundaries, she assured me during one particularly difficult session. Their reaction says everything about them, and nothing about you. Gradually, I established a new normal. I returned to work where I threw myself into coding projects with renewed focus. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the hardened edge that had replaced my usual easygoing nature, but few asked questions. Those who did received vague answers about family complications. What surprised me most was the support that emerged from unexpected places. My neighbor Thomas began inviting me to weekly poker games with his friends. My project manager Sarah made sure to check in regularly, sometimes bringing coffee just to chat. My college roommate Michael, upon hearing a abbreviated version of events, flew across the country for a weekend visit. These people, who had no biological obligation to care about me, showed more genuine concern than my own family had. They became what Dr. Marshall called my chosen family connections, based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than DNA and obligation. Through it all, I maintained a boundary of silence with my parents and sister. The only exception was Emma. After consulting with Dr. Marshall and a family attorney, I established a trust fund for Emma's future education. While I could not send her birthday cards or speak to her directly without going through her parents, I could ensure that she would have educational opportunities regardless of her parents' financial decisions. 6 months after the disastrous Christmas, my mother reached out via email. Her message was tentative, acknowledging the damage done without making excuses. "We betrayed your trust in the worst possible way," she wrote. "We understand if you never forgive us, but we want you to know we regret our actions deeply." Similar messages followed from my father and eventually Melissa. Theodore remained conspicuously silent. Through carefully controlled responses, I learned that the aftermath of that night had significant consequences. Theodore was passed over for a promotion he had been expecting. My parents had delayed retirement again, this time to help counseling for them and Melissa. Most significantly, Melissa and Theodore had entered couples therapy after serious discussions about divorce. The beach house had been sold, Melissa admitted in one email, along with the boat and most of the jewelry. "It was all meaningless anyway," she wrote. "No vacation home is worth what we did to you." 1 year after the incident, I agreed to a carefully structured family meeting at a neutral restaurant. Theodore was notably absent, Melissa explaining that they were now separated and heading toward divorce. He refused to accept responsibility, she explained. He kept saying it was just a misunderstanding, not a betrayal. My parents had aged visibly, guilt etching new lines around their eyes and mouths. They offered sincere, tearful apologies without qualification or expectation. Melissa, humbled by the implosion of her marriage and lifestyle, seemed genuinely remorseful. "We cannot undo what we did, Dad," said his voice breaking. "But we hope with time you might allow us some small place in your life again." "Trust is earned," I replied, the lessons of therapy evident in my boundaries. "It will take more than words to rebuild what was broken." The process was slow and often uncomfortable. Monthly phone calls led to occasional dinners. Each interaction carried the weight of the past, but also the possibility of a healthier future. I made it clear that financial discussions were permanently off the table. Any gift I gave would be of my own volition, never in response to hints or expectations. In my personal life, unexpected joy emerged from the ashes of family trauma. Sarah, my project manager, who had offered consistent support, gradually became more than a colleague. Our coffee chats extended to dinners, then weekends together. Her family, warm and straightforward Midwesterners, welcomed me without agenda or expectation. "They just like you for you," Sarah explained when I expressed surprise at their easy acceptance. No conditions, no scorekeeping. By the following Christmas, I had established new traditions and boundaries. I spent Christmas Eve with Sarah and her family, enjoying their boisterous gift exchange and traditional Slovak dinner. Christmas Day included a brief, carefully timed lunch with my parents and Melissa, with clear beginning and end points to prevent old patterns from re-emerging. Emma, now 6, provided the brightest spot in the reconciliation process. Free from her father's influence and with Melissa's new commitment to honesty, she flourished. Her innocent disclosure had ultimately forced a reckoning that, while painful, was perhaps necessary for authentic relationships to have any chance. The trust fund I established for her remained, though I now could also be present in her life as an uncle who took her to science museums and encouraged her budding interest in computers. "I want to make games like you, make programs," she told me during one visit, her eyes bright with the possibilities her future held. The most profound lesson from the entire experience was the recognition that family obligations are not automatic or unconditional. True family, whether biological or chosen, is built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care, not exploitation or entitlement. I learned to value myself enough to establish boundaries even with those who shared my blood. I also learned the extraordinary power of truth, especially when delivered through the unfiltered perspective of a child. Emma's innocent revelations had cut through layers of adult deception, forcing a confrontation that, while initially devastating, ultimately cleared the way for more authentic connections. As I sit here now, 2 years removed from that fateful Christmas night, I recognize that what felt like an ending became in time a painful but necessary new beginning. The relationships that survived are fundamentally changed, but perhaps healthier for having faced the truth. Those that did not survive were likely built on faulty foundations to begin with. Have you ever experienced a moment when painful truth ultimately led to growth? Did a betrayal ever force you to reevaluate relationships you thought were solid? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Sometimes the most difficult family stories help others feel less alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on family dynamics and personal growth. And remember to share with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries even with family is sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for them and for yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to healing, and I wish you strength in your own family challenges.